to order the City of Bloomington Board of Zoning Appeals for December the 15th, 2022. Roll call, please.
Ballard.
Here.
Burrell.
Here.
Coyne.
Here.
Clapper.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay. We have no minutes to approve. Do we have any reports, resolutions, and communications?
No. Sorry, thank you.
Okay. The petitions that are continued to the January 19th, 2023 hearing are AA-17-22, Joe Kemp Construction, LLC, and Blackwell Construction, Inc., and CU/V-2222, Mark Fig. This evening, the petitions to be heard are, we have one petition, is V-4622, Chris Brand. Can we please have a staff report?
Certainly. While I pull it up, I do not see, the person Elliot on the Zoom call may be the petitioner or may not be. Does that matter for us?
Doesn't a petitioner need to be present?
Yes, I believe so. Let's check the rules, but I'm pretty sure. Mr. Rooker?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Does a petitioner have to be present, a petitioner's representative, in order for us to hear the case?
I don't believe so, but hold on. Just let me look at the rules before I
Okay,
give the answer.
sure.
Can the person Elliot on Zoom confirm if you are the petitioner?
Yeah, I am. This is Chris Brand.
Okay. Okay,
Perfect.
wonderful.
Thank you.
Okay, great.
I'm not sure why it says Elliot. That's really, because that's happened a couple times. So I'm going to have to check into that. But I've done a couple Zoom meetings, and it seems like it pops up Elliot, and I'm not sure why.
Okay, well, we are good to move forward then with the case. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So I'm Gabriel Holbrow, zoning and long-range planner for the City of Bloomington. The variance request is for 2311 South Rogers Street. That's on the east side of Rogers Street in the Broadview neighborhood. The property is in the residential medium lot, R2 zoning district, and it's designated in the 2018 comprehensive plan as part of the mixed urban residential future land use area. The property formerly contained a single-family detached dwelling, which was demolished in 2015. The property is currently vacant, but there's an existing drive cut and drive apron on Rogers Street that served a former front yard drive for the former house. This is an aerial view of the property. Rogers Street's on the left, Coolidge Drive is at the bottom. Here's the existing front drive on Rogers Street and the existing alley serving the property from Coolidge Drive. In September 2022, the property received a building permit and a certificate of zoning compliance to construct a new detached single-family dwelling. In the R2 district, where there is access from an improved alley, the UDO prohibits drives and parking in the front yard and requires all parking to be off the alley. The certificate of zoning compliance issued in September noted this requirement and also noted that if the parking area off the alley were constructed, the existing drive cut and driveway apron on Rogers Street would have to be removed and a new curb would have to be constructed on Rogers Street. You can also see in this aerial view that the existing alley provides access to rear yard parking areas for at least 3 other adjacent homes. So the petitioner is requesting a variance to allow the existing drive cut to remain and to allow a parking area in the front yard. The size and dimensions of the proposed front parking area are compliant with the standards of the UDO that would apply to properties without alley access. This photo was submitted by the applicant and shows the status of the driveway in early November. Just really a side note, since then the existing concrete pad that formerly served as front yard parking has been removed in anticipation of either rebuilding a front yard parking area or not having front yard parking based on the outcome of this variance request. So this photo just shows that there's no longer concrete on the property in that area. I don't know if you can tell, but that's just graded dirt in the view. Here's a photo of the existing alley. It's improved with gravel. This is viewing north from Coolidge Drive. And the rear of 2311 South Roger Street is on the left after the shed and fence, which belong to a property on Coolidge Drive. The alley currently provides access to rear yard parking areas for at least 3 properties, including 2306 South Madison Street on the left here. You can see their garage door. 2310 South Madison Street on the right of this photograph, and then also 2305 South Rogers on the left of this photograph. So here are the findings that staff recommends. For the first criterion, that the approval will not be injurious to the community, our proposed finding is that allowing the existing drive cut and parking area to remain will not be injurious. Most of the other properties along South Roger Street in the Broadview neighborhood have driveways directly on Roger Street. We do recognize that eliminating this existing driveway could provide some benefits to the safety and general welfare of the community by limiting potential vehicular and pedestrian conflicts points and potential crash points on this busy neighborhood connector road. So keeping the existing driveway is missing out on some potential benefits, but allowing it to remain is just the current condition. It does not rise to the level of being injurious. For the second criterion, our proposed finding is that approval will not result in substantial adverse impacts to the use and value of surrounding properties. The proposed driveway and parking area are compliant with the standards of the UDO that apply to properties without alley access, and no issues have been raised with the existing driveway. It's when we get to the third criterion that staff finds some trouble with granting the variance. So as you are familiar, the third criterion requires practical difficulties in the use of the property, that the practical difficulties are peculiar to the property, and that the variance will relieve the practical difficulties. Our proposed finding is that no practical difficulty is found in the use of the property. The presence of the existing drive cut and the requirement to reconstruct the curb adds cost to the redevelopment of the property, possibly beyond what the petitioner expected. But this does not rise to the level of a practical difficulty as this is understood for the variance criteria. The presence of the improved alleys requires vehicular access from the back, as it would for any other property in this situation. While most of the properties in Broadview derive vehicular access directly from a platted road, at this location, 3 of the surrounding developed properties use the alley on the east side for vehicular access. There's nothing peculiar about this petition site, nor is there an impediment at the petition site that would make use of the alley practically difficult. Based on the report and the written findings of fact, the department recommends that the board adopt the proposed findings for V4622 and deny the requested variance. Thank you.
Petitioner,
Yeah,
can you please state your name?
yeah, Chris Brand.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, you now have up to 20 minutes to speak to your petition.
I don't think it will take, it won't take near that long. I know you guys have had a long day, and I wanted to tell Gabriel, I appreciate your help in this matter with everything we've been through. So yeah, in the last couple of years, I've built about 3 properties in Bloomington. This will be a comparable home that I've done 2 other times. And, you know, I've just been wanting to make neighborhoods look nice, and we have an opportunity to do that again along Roger Street. And I know that back, I don't know how many years ago it's not been very long, that Roger Street was redone, where like telephone poles or whatever electricity poles have been redone. The driveways and aprons were redone, looked really nice. And then, you know, we get a hold of this lot to build a nice home to improve the neighborhood. Because as you can see from some of those photos that Gabriel or whoever had showed earlier, there's a couple properties that are just not very nice properties. And so when you go in as a builder and you're going to improve a neighborhood, it's kind of exciting. And then you get told, hey, you can't use your existing driveway. You got to go in from the alley. And, you know, for lack of better words, that alley's pathetic. I mean, that's just a horrible way for a new homeowner to have to access their property. And I realize I'm at the mercy of whoever decides this, but I just ask that, you know, I understand if there was like maybe a 3-block area where somebody's going to say, hey, we want to relieve the area on Roger Street to reduce the traffic and so on. I would understand that, but to make this property an example seems silly to me. You know, now over the next, 50 to 100 years, there probably won't be another 1 or 2 houses probably torn down and redone where this would be applicable. And so to make me the example just seems, like I said, kind of silly. I understand why they're doing it to a certain extent, but to make me use that alley, it's just not a nice alley. And as you can see from the pictures, that alley is being blocked by two or three vehicles that are like abandoned vehicles. And I've already made arrangements with the neighbor to provide them free of charge with a huge dumpster to get rid of a lot of their trash to improve that area. Not just build the new house that I'm doing, but I'd like to help people out along the way and provide them with a dumpster. So, because it is really just horrible looking, the property to the north of this. I'm not sure what the address is, but it is to the north of the property. And I've already talked to them, and they said they would be on board if I was to put a dumpster back there, which would be a cost to me of about $1,500 to $2,000 with the debris that they have to remove. And so I feel like I'm putting my best foot forward and taking the high road and trying to improve something, and then to be told that I have to use the alley as opposed to the existing driveway, again, just seems silly to me. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. Like I said, it's really, the city of Bloomington's already spent quite a bit of money to put that sidewalk and apron that's already existing, and it just seems really silly to me to, and then for me to pay for it to be torn out, like in what Gabriel had presented earlier. It is an extra expense, and removing concrete's not cheap. And when it's really nicely done, like it's done, it just seems unfathomable to tear it out and say, hey, use the alley. I almost feel like a second-class citizen. And I understand what you're saying. There's 2 or 3 other properties that use that, and maybe they've been used to it or whatever, but I don't know. I just kind of hold myself to a higher standard and saying, hey, that's kind of subpar for me to tell a new homeowner that's going to buy this house in potentially 6-7 months, hey, nice house, but you got to use that kind of jacked up looking alley to get into your property. I don't know. I don't know. I try to hold myself to a higher standard than using things that are subpar. That's pretty much it.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so we are back to the board for questions of staff and the petitioner. Does anyone have questions? Okay.
My question is for staff. When I look at the GIS map, I see that there are several properties that have the driveway cut on Rogers, even though there is an alley in the back. Were they grandfathered, or, is this happening because he torn out the house and now he has to come to terms with the new UDO standards?
Yeah, basically, as you stated, the existing houses are allowed to continue as pre-existing lawful non-conforming site features, and they can continue until something triggers some level of compliance. And in this case, what triggers the compliance is building a new primary structure, which will be a new single-family house there. So that triggers full compliance for the property, all the different things in the code. So the proposed house has to meet setbacks, height restrictions, landscaping that applies to residential properties, all those things, which it will, and that review was completed for the CZC for the building permit for the house. And one of the the full compliance standards that this house has to meet is that where the access and the parking is. So it's building the house that triggers this compliance. So the existing properties that already have driveways on Rogers Street, that's allowed to continue until something would trigger compliance for them, such as demolishing and rebuilding a house or something like that.
Thank you.
Ms. Burrell, based on your question, sorry, I don't normally. Jackie Scanlon, Development Services Manager. There wasn't a change in code, so that hasn't changed. That's been in place since the previous UDO, that if you're in this particular zoning district and you have an alley that is accessible and we say improved in the code, and in this case it's being used by the adjacent properties and the property immediately to the east as well, that was already in code. So that's not something that's changed that they're now beholden to. It was always, it has been there for a long time. But like Mr. Holbrow said, it's because of the building the new structure.
Thank you.
So when the building permit came through for review, did the petitioner show parking? Did he show this parking being removed and new parking being proposed off the alley, or how was it shown?
I believe there is a site plan in the packet. No, sorry, excuse me. So there is a site plan in the packet that shows front yard parking. When the building permit application was submitted, the site plan did not identify any parking,
Okay.
which there's no required parking for a single-family house in this district or in any district. And so showing no parking or no vehicle access is compliant. So the CZC was issued based on that.
Okay. Okay, so no parking was indicated. So I guess one thing that is a little confusing to me is the way the CZC, in the second quote here, where it says that it noted that if a parking area accessing the alley is constructed, the existing drive cut and driveway apron on Rogers must be removed, and a new curb must be constructed on Rogers. So it sounded like if the owner wasn't intending to park off the alley, then the existing parking off Rogers would not have to be removed. That's the way that reads in my...
Admittedly, it's confusing. What we determined is if there is no parking on the property whatsoever, including no parking in the front yard, the drive cut could remain. That was,
Could you say that one more time, please?
if there's no parking on the property, the drive cut in the right-of-way
Could remain.
could remain.
The drive cut and the drive apron, I see. So it is a little confusing.
Yes, and as I'm saying it now, that sounds strange.
Yes.
But I think yeah.
Yeah, okay.
don't know if-
Okay, because the provision only addresses the parking, does it not? Or does it, in most cases, the driver parking shall be permitted. Okay, it's parsing it pretty,
It really just is getting at the issue. Without a variance, it is completely clear that no parking in the front yard is allowed.
is allowed. Okay,
That was trying to split hairs over whether the petitioner would be required to
remove.
rebuild the curb.
okay.
Yeah, because you can only have one vehicular access, right? So if they want access, if they want parking at all without a variance, they have to do it in the back. And then they have to remove any other access points that already exist on the lot, which means removing the one on Rogers.
Okay.
Similar, not exactly the same to the petition we saw at First and High Street a number of months ago, Mr. Pilichowski, where he was building a driveway on the east side now to access the new house he was building and didn't want to remove the driveway on the north side, even though he wasn't going to be used as parking. When we went through the exercise of following all of the definitions in the code, that access point did need to be removed, which I believe you all upheld that as well.
Okay. And just a question that doesn't directly relate to this case necessarily, but is a curiosity. How are alleys improved and cared for in the city at this point?
Yes, great question. So there are definitely some alleys that the city does maintenance on, but typically alleys in the residential areas, unless it's a large project, and Mr. Rooker can correct me if I'm wrong, is done by those who use that alley. So we have had, if someone comes forward, for example, and wants to build a house on a lot that has a platted alley but is not improved yet, they can do that. They can work with the engineering department to make sure that they're using the correct specs of whether they're going to do asphalt or gravel and, you know, to what depths they have to do. If they want to do that themselves to improve it, they can. So residential properties adjacent to alleys in the city, those owners of those properties do maintenance on the adjacent alleys.
Okay. And so there is no improvement schedule particularly for alleys at this point that are unimproved?
That are in the residential districts, I do not believe so.
Yeah, Michael Rooker, City Attorney, just to confirm. To my knowledge, there is no such program.
Okay. Thank you.
If it's all right to follow up on that, to just point out, hypothetically, if the platted alley at the rear of this property were full of trees and bushes, which we see across the city, because the UDO requires access off of an improved alley, one that was full of trees and bushes is not improved, and there would be the front yard parking could remain.
Okay. So even though the petitioner considers this a substandard roadway, this by the city would be considered an improved alley because vehicle access is functionally it can work in that manner.
Yeah, and I invite Ms. Scanlon or Mr. Rooker to correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that staff recommends a finding that this alley is improved as understood by the UDO, but that is within your purview to determine.
Okay.
Yeah, so in this particular case, and I can pull this up quickly, sorry. The property immediately to the east, which I mentioned before, is a fairly new home. It was built in 2014. So you can see it here. And let me see if I can zoom in. The house is obviously built, pedestrian oriented on the front, sidewalk connection, and then a vehicular access into an attached garage on the rear with this alley as obviously the only way that they get to that driveway. I think that sometimes when an alley isn't, paved or maybe newly modern gravel, we think that they're not kind of up, like as the petitioner said, maybe not up to his standard. But this is definitely a usable alley. Someone has definitely developed it, in this area within the recent past, and it was determined at that time that they could use this access and do. And then, of course, the properties to the north also use. But I do think that the one to the east is kind of the most instructive because it's not old. It hasn't been there for a long time, and they were able to develop it and use this alley as vehicular access.
And the last question that I have at the moment is, and maybe you mentioned this, I may have missed it, but when was the street improvements project done in this area? How long ago was that?
I haven't done research on that, but I believe less than a decade ago.
Pardon?
I believe less than a decade ago.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Very broad estimate.
Okay.
Back up, please.
Yes, just a second. Sorry, I just zoomed all the way out. Hold on just a sec. Okay, is that helpful?
Yeah, thanks. So I was trying to figure out so you said there were 3 adjacent properties using
These two here to the north both use it, and this property immediately to the east uses it as well.
okay. Yeah, and the one to the north also has a driveway.
Yes.
Okay.
To answer your previous question, I just took a look at Google Street View. There's a image from October 2013 that actually shows it under construction. So right about 10 years ago.
This improved alley, there are cars parked in the alley. So is this alley like, does it stop right there where the cars are parked? I mean, it doesn't look like it continues.
Yes, you can see in some of the photos that were part of the packet that, well, actually, it's maybe not so visible. The gravel improvement of the alley does end really at the north, aligned with the north edge of the property that the petition is for. And after that, it's grass. There might even be trees in it. So that part of the alley, I think, is fairly easy to say it is not improved. However, that's past the access point for the property that's part of this petition.
And that's where I'm having a little bit of a hard time with the improved alley idea. It doesn't, I mean, as I can see from the GIS, it stops 3/4 of the way in that property. I don't know, anyway.
Looking at that GIS, you know, you can also zoom in and see like tire tracks running through. So I guess for staff, I mean, I could see this turning into, if they're forced to use the alley, a potential legal issue with the amount of traffic, this house to the north and all the cars there, and the fact that they've got tire tracks on this property already. Yeah, to me, I don't know. That would be what would be a difficulty, I think, in my opinion, because I think also what the petitioner is saying is, if I'm looking at the improved alley versus the improvement the petitioner would be doing, I side with the petitioner. This as an improved alley, that is a low standard to me. I understand what the UDO says, but that's a very basic standard for housing. I live in that neighborhood as well, and yeah, I just think the foresight of what that potential house to the north could create is just something to be, I guess, considered for us. So that's it.
So, and this question is for the petitioner. What are the practical difficulties that you see with developing this lot, having to use the alley as the entrance? I've heard about what you think, but I would like to, for us, we need to have some concrete facts related to the practical difficulties in order to give a variance. So if you have any of those, I would love to hear it.
So you can hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Can you tell me a reason? Why am I muted through this whole conversation with everybody?
So, Mr. Brand, so we, as the board, have the opportunity to ask questions of the staff or of the petitioner. So it's really not a discussion. So like you now have been asked a question, so it's your opportunity to respond. And, you know, and you can comment further if you'd like. You will have another opportunity to speak again after public comment. So you do have an opportunity to speak. So this is really just a clarifications and question period.
Okay, no, yeah, and so to answer your, to answer your question, yeah, you say concrete facts. I don't know that I have concrete facts. I just know after doing, 60 plus either new residential builds or, fix and flip type homes in the last 20 or 25 years, I know that first appearances make a huge difference when you're trying to sell a home. And so, like I said, I mean, and I understand, yes, there's an alley, but to me, I mean, and I don't really feel like this is my opinion. I think if you took 100 people there, I'm pretty sure 90 plus people would say that's kind of a glorified cow path. I mean, there is nothing improved about that alley. I mean, there's barely gravel there. And yes, I understand what the gal was talking about earlier about that and there's only 2 properties that are served by that alley. The one with the garage, probably directly right behind 2311 South Rogers, and the one just north of that appears to be, but the one that's just north of the one that I'm going to be building the house on, like I said, there are 4 abandoned vehicles that do not run blocking that alley. So yes, it stops right there. And just past there is a huge tree in the middle of the alley. So to say it's improved is kind of a stretch. And just like I'm not sure what his name was. I think his last name was Ballard that spoke briefly. Never in a million years do I want to get in any kind of lawsuits, because that's like the last remedy. I think things can be done way before something like that happens. But again, I'm not saying I wouldn't pursue that, because like I said, it's really kind of an atrocious sight to drive back there when you say, hey, I'm going to be building, probably a $250,000 house. And then, hey, by the way, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, you got to access this property. It's embarrassing. I mean, it really is. It's just not something I think that should be done. Like I said, when you have such a nice entrance off of Rogers Street, and like I said, I want to be easy to get along with and say, hey, yeah, no, I understand if there was a big, 3 or 4 city blocks of South Rogers where this was going to be done. Like, yeah, I get it. That's going to take a lot of traffic maybe off Rogers, but when you're trying to single out one home at a time, I mean, I just can't believe I'm potentially being made maybe an example. But again, to answer your question, I don't necessarily have any hard concrete facts. I just know that it's just not a very professional way of conducting business. And like I said, I try to do my business above reproach and do things nice. And like I said, I mean, I try to build a very economical, family homes, try to keep it low cost for families. I'm trying to buy homes in Bloomington. And like I said, the house to the north of me, I've even, taken a step further to try to help the neighborhood by saying, hey, you know what, I'm willing to help you out. I know you don't have a lot of money. That's fine. I want to help you out if I can. It helps me and it helps you. And so, like I said, I feel like I'm taking the high road on this and trying to be, a good citizen or whatever. But then to say, well, hey, here's our rules and regulations if you do build a new home. Hey, thanks for building a new house and making the neighborhood nice, but oh, by the way, go ahead and get to the alley because that's how you're going to enter and exit your property. I don't know. That just doesn't seem right.
Thank you.
I'm done.
Okay, any other questions at this point from the board? Okay, then we are to the public. Is there anyone here from the public who would like to speak to this petition? This is the opportunity, and maybe there is somebody.
If you're on the Zoom and you'd like to speak, you can send me a chat, the Jacqueline Scanlon, or raise your hand. No one on Zoom, Barry.
Nobody's there? Okay, then we are back to Mr. Brand, who has a lot of remaining time, I'm sure.
Yep, 16 minutes.
16 minutes. If you have any last comments, Mr. Brand, this is your opportunity.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you, yes.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm not going to take 16 minutes. Like I said, I appreciate all your time, and I understand why there's rules and regulations to follow, because if you don't have that kind of stuff set in place, I've been a small business owner for most of my adult life, and so yes, I fully understand that you have to have things in order to make things, function properly and so on. However, I do believe there are some exceptions. And if there was ever an exception, when I've been building a house, I've run across a few issues here and there. But if there's ever been an exception, I truly believe this is one of them. That exception ought to be granted to me just to go ahead and use what's existing, what's there, as long as I apply by the rules of how wide the driveway is and so on and so forth. But I just hope, and that like I said, I realize I'm at the mercy of whoever decides and votes on this. But I just feel like this is one time where an exception really should be granted. So, but again, I do appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you very
That's
much.
all.
Thank you. Okay, so we are back to the board for action. If anybody would like to make a motion, and then we can discuss. Anyone?
Okay, I'll make a motion.
Okay.
I'll make a motion that, that V-46-22 will be approved, and for the third finding, I find that in this case, the alley is not a completely improved alley, so does not fall into what the CZC says, and also that it already has an existing driveway in the front, and we are, another practical difficulty here, I guess a practical difficulty is you're going to demolish something that's existing to construct something that is not necessary in a not improved alley. Does that make any sense? Jackie, does that make sense?
Yeah, I wrote it down, yeah.
Yeah.
Would it be helpful to put something up on the screen with
Sure,
this?
if you've
Sure.
typed it, that
Yes,
would be
if you
great.
take a, yes.
Could
So
you
what you're
read-
seeing, the black text is what was the proposed finding, and then red, I was trying to write down what you were saying, Ms. Burrell.
Yes.
Okay, the alley is not a completely improved alley. Maybe you could read it out loud. It's a little hard to see.
Yeah, it's hard to read, sorry.
Maybe I can make it
You
larger
make
as
it a
well.
little larger. Perfect.
What was it?
I would say does not fall into the CZC definition of an
definition.
improved alley.
Yeah.
And I would further clarify that a peculiar condition is the recently constructed driveway cut and apron and parking pad off the street that was part of a neighborhood improvements roadway project.
Is that, do I have down what you said?
Yes, I know. Well, we have to complete another practical difficulty is demolishing something that is existing.
It's an existing driveway.
You said demolishing something that is existing to replace it with,
That it's unnecessary to demolish
okay.
something that's already existing and follows code. Thank you. How does that look?
It's possibly taking out the sentence, and also it already has an existing driveway in the front. It seems that the second sentence states that,
It's redundant.
yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. And then just a practical difficulty rather than another practical difficulty under the first paragraph.
Sorry.
There, yeah.
May I, as staff, may I make a recommendation that where it says does not fall into the CZC definition of improved alley? I think it would
The UDO.
make more sense to reference the UDO, although
Okay.
I believe the UDO does not define improved alley.
I might recommend just delete CZC and just say definition if
Of an improved alley.
staff is comfortable with that.
Okay.
Because if we say UDO, then why are we here?
Right.
Does that,
Okay.
everybody feel comfortable with that definition?
Okay. Any further discussion? Did we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Further discussion?
It just strikes me that this particular part of town, it doesn't appear from the maps that that this is similar to a lot of the downtown areas that have a lot of alleyways. This seems like half an alley and doesn't quite fit in with the neighborhood, regardless, understanding the neighbor directly to the east is using the alley. It seems like it doesn't fit into the construct of the whole neighborhood.
And I would add that I think this particular case, also this neighborhood, the petitioners wanting to do a more affordable type of house and having to remove a perfectly reasonable, in fact, quite generous curb cut and, apron just seems like an additional expense. It's just an aside. It almost feels wasteful, since it was probably a public, it was a public improvement project that, everybody paid for. So, any other comments before we vote?
Can I ask for confirmation that in the motion there is no conditions recommended? Is that correct?
Are there any additional, there weren't any additional conditions with,
Well, the staff did not recommend any because we recommend denial.
okay. Do you have any further thoughts on that now?
I don't see any that would be necessary.
I would just add a condition that it would follow whatever driveway rules would be in place in a neighborhood where you could have a driveway that if you look across the street from this property, it's entirely paved, there is no yard, it's just a house and a big parking lot. So we just want to, I would say, just follow which I think the petitioner intends to do anyways, but that would be the.
So then we'd like to add a condition that any further development on the lot of a driveway or garage would comply with UDO standards. Does that make sense?
Yes, I just want to make sure you understand what that means. So like this parking pad, that doesn't meet code, that'll have to come up, right?
It's gone.
Oh, thank you, I knew I heard that at the beginning. The width, do you know how wide the driveway is?
The curb cut is about 20 feet, but it would be possible to, the
18.
width of the driveway would be limited to 18 feet,
18 feet.
but it would be possible to have it be 18 feet at the property line.
I mean, the petitioner understands, so there may be some work that would need to be done to the driveway to bring it into code compliance.
We can confirm directly with the petitioner, but in our previous conversations, we've discussed this,
Okay,
and
perfect.
he's understood.
I just want to make sure that you guys understand that before you add that as a condition.
So
Yeah.
I want to make sure we
I
understand
guess I
what we
don't want to
mean.
condition that, I don't want to cause more expense here.
So
The idea is just not to build a
The pad is already gone.
Yeah.
Correct.
The pad is gone, but the driveway cut is there, and it's it's 2 feet wider than would have been allowed.
Sure. Sorry. He's going to have to meet those requirements anyway. You can make it explicit, but he hasn't asked for a variance from the width of a driveway. So if it
Okay.
doesn't meet, he's going
Okay.
to have to do it.
So the driveway has to be
Yeah.
18
Yeah,
feet
you're
maximum.
allowing him to not access off the rear.
Yeah,
and to keep
I think-
his existing access location, but the development standards of that location are going to have to meet. And so that may mean some small changes, it sounds
Yeah,
like.
I think a condition is not necessary.
Okay, no
Okay,
condition.
okay.
Thank you.
We're retracting that. Okay, so we're ready for a vote. And so, yes is approving the variance.
Correct.
With no conditions.
with no conditions.
Clapper,
Yes.
Burrell,
Yes.
Ballard? Coin.
Yes, thank you.
4-0, thank you.
The petition is successful, and we are adjourned.